Hey ho, we're here.
Who's a hoe? Who are you calling a hoe?
Russ, what's going on?
Well, I know Kevin's probably watching up one eye, the same thing I am, because the Mets are playing the Tigers, and they're having a doubleheader today. So he's going to probably peek in on it. I'm sure.
Scherzer's pitching today, so
yeah, it's night. He'll be the night game.
Yeah. So for sure, Verlander's going tomorrow. I couldn't get any. Yeah. Couldn't get the person I wanted to go with me to the see Verlander tomorrow. I wanted to go watch that.
If I lived closer, I'd go.
Yes,
he's actually pitching,
and I would actually look forward if you and I were going to that
game. Yeah, it would be fun.
My wife had given me a lot of options, and I didn't like any of her options.
I did want to mention the Jets are going to make a signing in a day of Randall Cobb, who is a receiver that has caught a lot of passes for Aaron Rodgers. The problem is the Jets already have a great receiving core, and they're going to end up swapping out a 32-year-old 5'10" receiver for a 28-year-old 6'3" receiver, just to make Aaron Rodgers happy. And this is where I feel like the Jets should have drawn the line. It's like, listen, we made alterations for you. We like our core here. We're not changing the whole damn team for you, but they are. And so there's a lot of fans that are mad now because, again, the Jets were in a rebuild. Then all of a sudden they got Aaron Rodgers, and then things started to happen. They started trading younger players, whatever. If this whole thing with Aaron Rodgers doesn't work out, like the Jets aren't even looking at the future, which I still think is a mistake. And a lot of there's a fair number of fans that are angry today because they felt like Rodgers got enough as far as in what he was asking for or what he would like. And this is almost like a step too far. So it'll be interesting to see how it all works out. But he'll be a Jet, so nobody could stop that.
Your organization has hoarded itself out there, Russ, and you just have to accept it.
Yeah, I've got a little something to talk about today, and I can sort of tie it to hockey a little bit because I think there is comparable to it. In baseball, they're talking about whether teams should be forbidden from using non-pitchers to pitch in blowouts, and one of the sentiments is that if you can't tell us that we can have only X amount of pitchers on our roster and then tell us we can't use non-pitchers when we get in a bind, we're running out of arms. So, and there's some logic to that. But I think this is much ado about nothing. And I also think that we lose sight of the fact that when this does happen, it's a blowout game. And, everyone's lost interest because it's a 10-0 game or a 12-2 game or whatever. And this brings, kind of some fun to it. Like, I've seen, I can't even remember who it was. It was the first baseman. He was going against Freeman. They were buddies. He struck him out. That was fun. Russ, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. The name's not going to come up, though.
Yeah, it doesn't come to me either. We saw Clemens kid pitch for the Tigers last year.
He pitched 2 days in a row now for the Phillies, too.
Yeah. That's just fun stuff. Like sometimes in sports, it's the same thing when I hear this nonsense about third goalies and whether he should play and all that. I mean, sometimes we take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah,
I have often we take ourselves seriously.
Yeah, I mean, come on, let's just when it happens, it happens.
There have been
enjoy the ride.
There have been plenty of times in history, Kev, when all of a sudden, like a regular player has to strap on the catcher's gear because they're out of catchers. Like these things happen, so it's like whatever.
Yeah, no, that's right on, Russ. And I just think somehow we try to legislate too much about what's happening. Sometimes you got to let it go, just like it would in Little League baseball. When in Little League, sometimes the catcher doesn't show up and somebody's got to catch it's never caught before. Sometimes you run out of pitchers and you bring the kid from right field and he strikes out the same thing happens in the major leagues. Guys swing and miss at 47 mile an hour pitches and it's fun. It's a different kind of fun, but it's fun. So,
actually, the most hilarious instance of that this year was a guy that's been on your fantasy team and our fantasy team, Kev, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. He came in a blowout for the Yankees when they were down like 12-1, and he struck out the batter. And as he walked off the mound to the umpire, he said, "Do you want to check my hands?" And he had only a 45-mile-an-hour knuckleball, and the guy said, "No, you're good."
Yeah, I tell you, that's
Talk
but I mean, that stuff's just fun, and sometimes we lose sight that sports are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be an opiate of the masses, and we just get too carried away about third goalies and shortstops pitching and stuff. So anyway, that's my rant, or my version of a rant for the day.
No, very good, very good. All right, let's get going here. Ready? Okay, let's try this day. Let's look at the day. What the hell is it? May 3rd. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It's Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023.
I'm Michael Agello, and the Eck curse continues.
I'm Russ Cohen. I went 4-4 the first round, and I think I'm going to do better this round.
Yeah, I went 4-4 in the first round too, and I think it's just representative of what the nonsense that we saw in the first round. So,
Yeah.
so it's fun.
That was Kevin talking, and I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. We're listening. Always forget about many people listen and don't actually. That's why we do say our name at the beginning of the show.
I went 3-5, by the way, so don't ever listen to what I predict.
I didn't go through mine yet. I should do that. But anyway, you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com, and we have last night's games to get into first, and the two Cinderellas, Cinderella East, Cinderella West, both continue on their way. Let's start with the Toronto game, Mike. You might as well. It's right there. Oh, by the way, Kevin, who did you pick in those other two series, Toronto and in these two series from yesterday? I didn't get your.
I picked Toronto.
Okay, I did too.
Yeah, and which one did you ask me about now?
No, it's in the Seattle series, right?
Yeah, I took Dallas as well.
Okay. So I took Toronto and Seattle. Mike took Toronto. No, Mike
I took Florida and Dallas.
Florida and Dallas, and so did Russ, right? Florida and Dallas. Yeah.
I took Florida and Dallas, yes.
That's where we are. I took Toronto and Seattle. So there you go. All right. So last night's game, it was a lot like kind of what I thought it would be, except a lot of people were ripping on me because sometimes in the beginning of the second round you have this little bit of a little down game because there was so much excitement. Both these teams overcame and won very, very dramatic games, very dramatic series, and yet they came out flying. This was a fun game, like right from the beginning of the game.
It was, but I thought there was more of the residue of the Florida victory over Boston than there was the Toronto victory over Tampa. In the sense, I think that Florida, the momentum had continued from that victory over the Bruins. And the Leafs, and Russ and I were talking about this before, the Leafs have to take advantage of their power play opportunities. Yeah. The Panthers take lots of penalties. I know Paul Maurice was doing this on the bench at the end of the game because the Leafs played 6 power plays. Well, when one of your players, combs Ryan O'Reilly with a high stick and he's gushing blood like he's Ric Flair, that you're going to get called for that. But the Leafs have to cash in on those, and they simply didn't, especially those 2 power plays early in the first period where they got a number of really good scoring chances, and Bobrovsky was Superman, and he played phenomenal yesterday. And I think the Leafs will learn the lesson that they have to do similarly to what they did against Vasilevsky with Bobrovsky. They have to, take his eyes away, make sure that he can't see the puck, because if he sees it, he's going to catch it. And he was phenomenal yesterday, along with Matthew Tkachuk. And Kev, this was the thing I said after the game. Again, the secondary players for Toronto played pretty well. There were some performances that were sort of not that great. Jake McCabe did not play well, neither did TJ Brody. But in a head-to-head matchup of one core group against another core group, Tkachuk, 9 hits, 3 assists. Barkov, 2 assists. Montour, Bennett, goals. With the Leafs, nothing from Matthews, nothing from Marner, nothing from Tavares, nothing from Nylander, nothing. And when the core group doesn't do something, they're going to lose.
I mean, I think that's a fair analysis. I wrote this morning that all the players on the Panthers who have been playing well and who have created this momentum all continued on with that. Verhaeghe got another game-winning goal. Tkachuk now leads the NHL in points and was a beast, as Mike said.
Hits. He had 6 hits in the first period.
9 hits. Ball,
6 in the first period, 9 overall.
Yeah. Bobrovsky continues, all of a sudden we're not snickering about his $10 million salary. He's won 4 in a row that ties Van Beesbrook's team record. And I know I saw one of the headlines where they quoted somebody as saying that Bobrovsky was the key to that victory, and you can certainly make that case. I would argue that it was Tkachuk, but it certainly you can sort of make that case. And as Mike pointed out too, just everybody that they needed to have a good game did, and in Toronto's case, they didn't. But the one thing that we know from history is this is why I don't get too excited about game ones, and the probability in all sports of winning a series it's 65%. If you win game one, you're going to win the series. In the NHL, it's closer to 52%. The first game is just not as because you're just sort of feeling each other out.
Yeah.
And then once you get into it and everything else, then it becomes a series. Like in the second game is to me when it really starts.
Yeah,
so, I agree with that 100%.
Aside from what Mike said that we talked about, the biggest things for me was I still think that Florida is playing at a gear that's even higher than the Leafs.
Yeah.
I do think that, again, Samsonov, if you look at his playoff numbers, he is exactly where his playoff numbers are. And he's pretty much given up 3 goals on average in all games. And so Bob is playing more like Vezina Bob, and I do think that is a factor. And then, the other factor was, and I do think the Leafs showed toughness. Look, Shen smashed somebody. I mean, they did battle back, but there's this gut feeling. The reason I picked Florida was because of Bob looking more like a Vezina guy, and Florida just looking like they're just a little bit at a higher gear than the Leafs. And I just did it like a matchup of boxing styles. And I think this is even though it looks like they may play similar games, I don't know about that because, again, I think at the end, it still may come down to who's in net.
Florida is much more physical. Florida is much more aggressive on the forecheck. I heard the analysis from I think it was Jeff Merrick was talking about them making the Bruins defense, which is much better than Toronto's, look bad in comparison, and Toronto is going to have to deal with that. But the thing is that Toronto, I think, read the hype, Kev, and they said, okay, we've got to step up physically. And guys like Morgan Riley and Luke Shen did, and Jake McCabe was going out looking to make the big hit, and they took themselves out of position to make the big hit. And on the game-winning goal, the Verhaeghe breakaway, that was the responsibility of McCabe stepping up for a hit and Brody not reading the play. And they just have to let the game come to them. They can't go out and do those things proactively.
I really thought that that was the most physical I've ever seen the Leafs play in a playoff game.
Right.
I mean, do you agree, Mike? I mean, that they really
they were consciously. I mean, how many times did Tkachuk get knocked on his backside?
Yeah, I mean, they were hitting. I mean, they were really hitting hard, and they were hitting cleanly, and they were, where the difference there, obviously, in certain situations was you could see that the Panthers weren't hitting so legally. they were taking penalties, and honestly, the Panthers gave up a lot of power play goals to the Bruins. And if you were to tell me that they would win that game last night after giving up 3 power plays early on like that to Toronto, I would not have believed you. Like I would have thought if Toronto got 3 power plays early on, that game's over because they got. Bob played great, but Bob got a little bit lucky on a couple plays too. Like don't I mean, Matthews hits the post on that first breakaway.
Sure, there's always a little luck.
No, but twice now in overtime. I mean, I don't know if you saw this or not, but in overtime of the Boston series, and then last night with the game, like on the line too, Bob has made saves on the top part of his goalie stick. That's just like I mean,
Bob's been very aggressive in making sure there's no rebounds, and I think that's the big difference between him and Samsonov right now.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is too is as much as I think Bob has been crucial to this success. He hasn't been invincible, even close to it. In fact, his numbers are kind of brutal. He's at 3.68 for goals against and 901 save percentage. In the postseason, our expectation for playoff goalies is somewhere north of 920, and a save and a goals against average, depending on how good your defense, and somewhere in the 2 point something range, and certainly not 368. So, I mean, I'm real impressed with Bobrovsky. I mean, I think he's been right there when they've needed him, and then particularly in the last game. But he hasn't. It's not like they're looking at the video and going, "How the heck are we going to beat Bobrovsky?" Like that. That's not how it's going.
Yeah.
They're just thinking they got to be a player game. The other thing I'd say about hitting too, and actually, I think it was Scott Stevens. I'm pretty sure it was who talked to me about this when I did a book called Crunch, which is on the value of hitting. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, I'm known for making all the big hits, but to be honest with you, he said, I don't think those are nearly as important. When we talk about toughness in terms of playoff, it's the ability to go in the corner and get the puck and to take a hit. Like that's what we talk about, in terms of toughness. Like, when you're going to play a playoff style of game, it's the guy going in that takes the hit and comes out and gets the puck and comes out with it. Like we don't talk about you got to crush some guy to, and you talk about finishing your checks, but always in how it relates to the game action, not do it just to do it. Like, we're not trying to rile up the crowd by pulverizing a guy. So, but I agree. I mean, I thought Toronto, the term phrase everyone uses now is pushback. I thought Toronto had a lot of pushback, so.
Yeah, they did. They definitely did. And it seemed like that game could have gone either way, honestly, to me. It was very close in Florida. I was impressed. I do think that Florida saw that it was easier to move through the Bruins defense. I mean, through the Maple Leafs defense than it was the Bruins defense. Like I talked about that. I definitely saw that. You could see.
Barkov certainly nobody's worried about him now, right?
Yeah, he looked a lot better. Lundell again looked really good. He continues to.
Montour's still scoring.
Montour's, yeah. I mean, and Verhaeghe, he's money. It's just crazy.
That Ekblad goal, that whole thing was weird with the bounce, but Ekblad is still an X factor. Toronto can boast that they have a better defense, but their defense is still older. If Ekblad's still out there and he's 65%, he is still a force.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He's a very much.
You have to have him, face him on the ice, whether it's him offensively or him defensively, and that's still something you have to deal with too. So Toronto's going to have to go about it a little differently. They are this series.
Yeah. I still think this. Yeah, I agree with Kevin. This series is you can make too much out of game one on this one because I think that this is a long series. It feels like a long series. Although Nye's goal was amazing. I mean, we have to give him credit though. That was an incredible goal from a really young player. That was something.
Yeah, that was a great goal. I have to give credit to Maurice though, because I do think what he is doing as far as lobbying about the way the power plays are and everything else is a brilliant move because he knew it would get a lot of attention, but he also knows that if he keeps hammering the refs, at some point he is going to get a call. And I do think that's a difference. Hold on, Mike. I do think that's a difference between him and Sheldon Keefe because Keefe doesn't do that, and I think Maurice is smart for trying.
Well, that's the same thing Cooper did, and it didn't work. It didn't work for Tampa. I mean, when your team plays out of control, which Florida sometimes does, they're going to get penalty calls. Now, Keefe is not lobbying the referees for calls because he knows better not to do that in Toronto because usually it has the reverse effect. So, I mean, Maurice can sort of cry about the officiating all he wants, but if his players will have to play a little more under control for them to avoid giving 5 or 6 power plays to Toronto, and eventually that could kill them unless Toronto's power play doesn't.
Well, there were instances there were some plays pointed out where Tkachuk got hooked and it didn't get called, and so he didn't just do it because he felt like the number was uneven. He saw some calls that didn't happen. That's why he's doing it.
Yeah, I think Nylander was one of the best leaves on the ice last night, though. I thought Nylander was really good.
Well, I mean, he had opportunities. He led them with 7 shots on goal. But if I had $1 for every person who asked me about that puzzling play that he had where he had a clear break in on Bobrovsky going wide, the Florida defenseman vacated the zone. He was all alone, and instead of curling to the net and going for a scoring chance, he just seemed like, I don't know what I'm doing, almost like he thought he was offside. It was a blown opportunity. And then in a 2-2 game, they had opportunity. They worked very hard to climb back to even, and then essentially gave it right back to Florida with the Verhaeghe goal late in the second period, and they never really recovered from that. So it's going to be a longer for all those people who thought, the Leafs are going to sail through Florida. No, this is a tough team. This is a team that battled back against, arguably the best team in the NHL this year. And, if the Leafs do win it, it's probably going to go 6 or 7 games. Again, I picked Florida, and I'm comfortable with that pick, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's get to the other game.
What Jesus.
Ottinger, first of all, 4 goals in the first period. Like who would think that would happen? That was
odd.
Good, Kev.
Well, I mean, he's one of the last goalies because his hallmark is just how steady he is.
Yeah.
And for him to be in that position, the whole game, just when you think about it, Pavelski just has an unbelievable game.
Yeah.
And I loved DeBoer's attitude about it too. And I appreciate it as a journalist, but also as someone who just loves the game. There are coaches who, if a guy has a great game and they lose, they can't discuss it.
Right.
And DeBoer called Pavelski epic. He was willing to do. He stepped outside his "I'm angry about the game" just for long enough to recognize that what we saw out there in Pavelski's actions as an older player getting 4 goals was just something. So I do appreciate that, but that was just a poor effort by the Stars, starting with Ottinger and then starting with even the rest of the team. The fact that they needed Pavelski to step up like that, and you don't expect that. The Stars are, the reason they're here is they're pretty consistent in their effort. Like, they're not spectacular. They're not a spectacular team, but they're pretty strong in a lot of areas and they get the job done. But they were just weak. Like, that was a regular season effort for a big playoff game.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great way of putting it. I agree with you. There was no intensity. It was 1-0 Dallas, and the second they scored that goal, I think they thought, well, this is going to be an easy series, and it just sort of stopped. And I looked up. Next thing I was helping my son get ready for bed and stuff like that, and we were. I look up and it's 3-2 Seattle, and I thought they were showing highlights of like an earlier season game or something. Like, I couldn't imagine it had gone from 1-0 to 3-2 Seattle at the time that I had been not looking at it. It was hardly any time at all. Just nuts. And Seattle, they're finding ways. They're finding ways. It's that's why I went with them. I kind of just set them on this team of destiny type thing. I think that we're going to see I think it's going to get better as we go here for sure.
So here's the thing that I noticed in this game. Well, for one thing, the one fun thing about this game was, and I was seeing the comeback and the goals from Pavelski and was amazed. But when Seattle put up the game winner, Pavelski used the F word on the bench because that's like I would have done the same thing because it's like I scored 4 goals, I brought us back, and we're going to lose this game. Like, he wasn't like super mad, but like the reaction was genuine, and I appreciated that. And that goal wasn't even Ottinger's fault. It really was Ben's fault for not helping Lindell clear it, or at least keeping his stick out of the way so Lindell could clear the puck. So I don't think it was all on Ottinger. I do think Seattle is an opportunistic team, and I do think that Dallas's defense isn't great. I think that's showing. Yeah. So I do think it ends up being a long series, and Seattle scored more goals than I thought they would. So again, they're still surprising me.
They really are. So let's get down to the tonight's games, the series that begin now, because we have to, and we got a couple good ones. Let's start with I think the harder one to get into. So we'll go with Edmonton and Vegas, so we have enough time for this one. Okay. I called it the conference final of the Western Conference. I think these are the two best teams. And I'm not trying to not give Dallas credit, but I just feel like they are the two best overall teams, and Dallas is right there with them. But
I dispute that because I don't think Vegas and any one of the goaltenders that they have is as good as Ottinger. And I know Ottinger didn't play well in game 1, but I do think Ottinger will be the difference between for Dallas winning that series. And right now, Brassois or Logan Thompson or Aiden Hill or Jonathan Quick or the ghost of Marc-Andre Fleury.
I think it's the ghost of Jonathan Quick. It's the least reported story. Like, he just seemed to fade off after he wasn't going to be the starter. And we haven't heard boo about Jonathan Quick
Is
being
he hurt? We don't know.
being anywhere. We haven't seen pictures of him. For all we know, he just doesn't want to play if he's not the backup. That's what I'm still taking out of it.
And you might see him in this series because we do know that he was fantastic against Edmonton in the first round last year.
Why wouldn't they play him?
But there's no mention of this guy anywhere with the team coverage. Nobody is talking about Jonathan Quick.
Right.
Nobody.
Yeah. I mean,
have you heard anything about this? What's going on with it?
No, other than the fact that I don't think they, were all that impressed early on with him when he was there. So, I don't know what it was. I mean, he's not, Quick has been great in the postseason, but he's not one of those guys that quickly endears himself to, people. And, if, chemistry is always so important and all that. So I wouldn't be surprised. I bet it's a myriad of factors. I think they didn't look necessarily like how he's looked. And they're more comfortable with the other guys, just the connection with the team. So, this is one of the problems when you don't get any information out of the team too. You're left to speculate, and there's always a danger of getting it completely wrong because he could be injured, and we just simply didn't know.
Plus, Brossoit played really well down the stretch, so they're just going with the hot guy.
And it doesn't seem like Thompson's skating yet, from what we can tell.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the series is going to be fantastic because, for the other thing is we get Eichel and, Connor McDavid in the same series. And both of them, Eichel's got 5 points and McDavid has looked fine. And, so you have both of those teams. And I also think in a short period of time, Vegas has become somewhat of a national team. I think there's a lot of people who are interested in the Golden Knights because, they got out of the gate so quickly. And I think a lot of people are interested in the Oilers because of not only Connor McDavid, but Draisaitl as well. And so, they're seen as, kind of a dynamic team. So, this is a nice package game for the networks to have as the second game of a doubleheader. Because this is really a nice marquee matchup. I think it could be fun. It could be entertaining.
People stay up for this matchup.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good one. So I think this is a. Oh, and by the way, I meant to bring this up too. I just saw a statistic. I joked the other day about the NBA versus NHL numbers. I think I saw the Game 7s, the two of them combined for 10 million viewers. I don't recall ever seeing numbers like that.
No, not like that.
The numbers for the playoffs are up 19%. I just saw this.
Morning. But 10 million. I mean, this is when you're at 1 million and you go up 10%, you go up to 1.1 million. You know what I mean? Right. So we were so low, but if those numbers are accurate that I saw, that's phenomenal.
Well, there were a lot of Game 7s. I mean, that is a reason.
Yeah. Well, the two combined for 10 million is what it said. So
was that
I think weren't there 3 Game 7s?
There were 3 Game 7s. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Right.
But it was two. The last two is one.
Yeah. I can see. I mean, again, the Rangers Devils I knew would probably break some records because I could tell that there was a great interest just in that area even before I got to the game. Like everybody was talking about it, so that was pretty obvious. Yeah, I mean, this is good for the game in a way. I know people here. This is a double-edged sword. I know people say, "Well, it's bad when Boston's out and New York is out and everything else." But then a lot of times when you have an idea that there's going to be a new Cup team, you could get surprise viewers too for if some other team catches the public's attention. Now, I don't know if anybody's done that yet, but certainly McDavid could do that.
Yeah, I mean, and we got Tkachuk in Florida. We've got Matthews with Toronto. We've got Eichel, and people know who he is. And we certainly got McDavid and Draisaitl.
Stars left.
Jack Hughes too, because Hughes had that incredible series.
There's enough stars left.
I don't think he has the
cachet.
Yeah, not yet. I think people see him still as a rising star.
I'm going to tell you, he said something yesterday. I think it was yesterday, which I'm sure angered Ranger management, and that is, well, it's good that we beat the Rangers, so we don't have to worry about them for the next year. And I'm sure our fans are really happy about this because it's a nice rallying point for them. Like he said something like that, and I think that was very smart of him to say because he knows how irritated the Rangers would get by losing a series to the Devils. That's irritating to them.
I think he's there playing wise. Like I think his level of play is high enough to do that. I just don't think. I think because he's playing in New Jersey, I don't think he gets the national.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yet. But a long playoff run will put him right over the top.
In that Ranger series, he was starting to do some McDavid, McKinnon type runs, where he would take the puck and just go.
He would have runs, but he wasn't connecting on all.
He wasn't finishing them, but he was getting really close to finishing them, and he was getting through like two defenders. Once he starts finishing those and those show up on SportsCenter, we're going to see a lot of different things because
here's the other thing too, which I think is interesting. I think most of Eichel's attention, came from the fact of his departure from Buffalo.
Yes,
like, you know what I mean? Like, it was the controversy of Eichel that's kind of created.
Well, Buffalo's always a good market anyhow for the Cup. It's a known good market, even though they're never in.
And how he would do in his first playoff opportunity since he was in Buffalo for a decade 2015. So for 7 years. And didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, but I disagree a little bit. Like, I don't think people would turn in to see just a regular player's first, if it had been that. I think they're tuning in because the Eichel is, aura has been created by this, I want to have my surgery my way, and I'm not going to listen to you, and now I'm going to trade you. And then he ends up with a high-profile team, in Vegas. So I think all that is kind of added to it. And, he's certainly he's been a consistently very good player, but I think the kind of the way he departed Buffalo kind of played into it.
Sure.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about this series is I had a real hard time trying to pick the winner here because I think this series has the most talent. I think the most talent on both sides, and I think that they're both really good teams. They do go about it a little differently, but there's a lot of strengths. Not a lot of weaknesses on either side. I went Oilers in 6, and I think the reason I went Oilers in 6 is because I like their secondary scoring now a lot better than I did a year or two ago. And I think that, it seems like it's a Nugent-Hopkins year where that's a big thing. And they're going to start getting scoring from Yamamoto and McLeod. That's really going to do well for them. Bouchard's coming of age. Vegas has all these name guys, don't get me wrong, and their defense is better than Edmonton, but still, you have McDavid in there, you have Draisaitl in there, and if you have these other complementary pieces, it's still going to be very hard for Vegas to win.
Well, they did it.
Thank you, Andrew. You're right.
Yeah, they did it against Los Angeles. I'm skeptical whether that secondary scoring will continue against Vegas, who I think overall are a much better defensive team than Los Angeles. I think that Draisaitl and McDavid will have a much more difficult time breaking through against Theodore and Martinez and Braden McNabb and Pietrangelo on the blue line with Nick Hague. A lot of size on that blue line. They're not going to be allowed to go to the front of the net like they did against the Kings. Now the goaltending I think is a question mark. Maybe they switch away from Brossois if they fall behind, but there are just as many question marks as Eck and you and everybody else have pointed out about Skinner. And I think it just gets worse if they go to Jack Campbell, whereas it might get better if they go to somebody else with Vegas. And their forwards, I think they're just as deep. Maybe they don't have McDavid or Draisaitl, but they have a lot of really quality forwards, guys like Stone, who are, who's won or been a perennial Selke nominee, and they're strong up the middle. So I went Vegas in 7 because I just think they're the better team.
You went Vegas in 7 because you dislike Edmonton.
I think they're the better team. I think really do.
All right, you can say that.
Kevin, yesterday we said we would love to see the dilemma should Edmonton face the Maple Leafs in the Stanley Cup final as to who might. He
would take Edmonton because he's required to say that Toronto's going to lose. So.
That's the big dilemma, though.
I got the Oilers as well in this series. I think they're going to score. What Mike said is correct, but I think Connor McDavid and Draisaitl can score against any defense. They're just so skilled, and they get to the net. And I do think they've got the guys that can get inside, that defensive coverage. I believe in their secondary scoring, and I think they're going to score goals, and goaltending will play a role for sure. But I'm not sure it's going to decide the series. I think there's going to be goals scored, and whoever gets the last goal wins. Maybe a goalie will steal a game here and there. We'll have to see. But I like the Oilers feel like they're ready to make a run here to me. So yeah, we'll see. But that's
feels like the path has been cleared for the Oilers in a lot of ways. To me, I really feel like they have a good shot too. But Kevin, I think they're more of a team than the Knights are. I mean, the talent's there, but I feel like Edmonton plays more like a team than Vegas does. Vegas has definitely all the talent, but they've had so many guys in and out with injuries all throughout the year, so many different situations where Edmonton's pretty consistent with who they played as far as injuries. They haven't had that many injuries. They build it up. I do believe that both goalies who start tonight will not be the goalies who end the series. That's my prediction. A wacky prediction. I think that we will see Campbell and somebody else for Vegas. I don't know who that'll be, but I think that you got to be really, really good.
Then you should be picking Vegas then.
No, stop it. You got to be really, really good to actually you need a good goalie to stop this Edmonton team, and I don't think they have that on Vegas. I think as good as he's as well as Brisson's played and all that stuff, I just don't think he's strong enough. It is amazing when you think about it right now. And this one thing that was dawning on me this morning is I can't remember a Final Eight with more teams that didn't really know who their goalie was. like this, there really aren't we have a lot of interesting different goaltending situations going on for a Final Eight. Normally maybe one team has two goalies they could go to either night, but
it just shows the hesitancy of a lot of these coaches to go to one goaltender. I mean, Linus Ullmark played 6 games for Boston, and the reason they pulled him in Game 7 is because apparently he had injury problems. Obviously the Rangers weren't going to go away from Shesterkin. New Jersey went away from Vanacek. Carolina went away from Ronta. I think they're. Go ahead.
No, you're right. I mean, it's Mike.
I don't think New Jersey has 2 goalies anymore. After being around that team in the locker room, talking to people, I think when they made the switch, they actually have made the switch. I don't think they're making it back.
I don't think it's permanent. I mean, it could be. Listen, as of now, man, I agree with you 100%. The Jersey goalie, his confidence is crazy. You can see the confidence he's playing with that shutout in Game 7.
I mean, he could have taken him. He could have left him out after the. And the interesting thing is when he was pulled, he didn't know that he was the Game 7 goalie until after the next day's morning skate. That's a long time to let a kid sort of hang there. But the fact that he did, and he did that well, I don't think he's pulling him this series. I just don't.
I mean, I think he will because the fact that if they fall behind in the series because Vanacek was such a good goalie all year for them, and he had a tough beginning against the Rangers, but the reality was, like I said, he's the second most wins in Devils history this year. He was good. He's not like you have a bad choice there. I wouldn't go away from this kid though until he really has a problem, but because right now he's just ridiculous. But yeah, I do think that this is the Oilers series to lose. I think it'll be a good series. I think it'll be a high scoring series. I think Edmonton Vegas will be high scoring. I think they will actually both try to go for it. And at the end of the day, I think it is going to come down to goaltending. I really do. And I trust Edmonton 2 better than I trust any 2 on Vegas.
I do have footage here. Mike doesn't know this, but I have footage from 1985 when Mike picked the Philadelphia Flyers over the Edmonton Oilers. So I'm going to play that footage now.
So I've got Edmonton in 6. So let's go to now Carolina, New Jersey. This is the only series they've actually played each other before. The other 3 series have never played each other in the playoffs, which I thought was awesome. But these guys have played each other 4 times back in the aughts, and But this series, Kevin, where are you going with this? This is such
I thought this was a tough one. I think New Jersey to me was more impressive than Carolina was in their trying. And it really looks like they're struggling to overcome their injuries. And, the fact that, just listen to what you said. They had to go away from Ranta.
Yeah.
That's,
Isn't he their third goalie?
Yeah. So I'm going to go with New Jersey, even though, I would have taken Carolina coming into these playoffs if you had told me they were playing against New Jersey, because I would have said New Jersey has to learn how to win in the postseason. Well, I think they grew up in this 7-game series against the Rangers. They don't seem to have any problem understanding what it was required to try to win in the postseason. So, we've talked about the Devils offense and their speed, and now they've added a goalie who, I don't think he knows, like I often say, you don't know what you don't know when you're young, and he's young. He doesn't know, that he should be nervous, and he's, just playing over his head. And, he's kind of, we talk about momentum teams. To me, he feels like a momentum player.
Yes.
I think of the three positions, forward, goalie, and defense, I don't think you can get away with young defensemen in the postseason. That's much harder to deal with.
True.
But I think you can certainly always get away with young forwards because you can spot them. You can play them on the fourth line. You can limit their minutes. And with a goalie, I think you can almost get away with that as well, just for the reasons I said. You don't know all the stuff you should be concerned about. So you play just on reflexes, and 22-year-old reflexes are pretty good. And he knows his position. He's athletic, and he's getting the job done. So Carolina, I still love their defense, but I just wonder if they're going to be able to get enough goals. Taking those players out of the lineup, that's too much. It's too much for that team.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I was in the locker room with New Jersey, and I do like Carolina's defense still, and I do think they have rallied to a certain degree. I did see what the Devils did with the Rangers and how they overcame the Rangers' physicality, which is something they're going to have to overcome again with Carolina. And Schmid is funny because, he was asked the question, is he surprising himself in what he's been able to do? And he said, yeah, a little bit. So it is one of those things where he, when he's taken it like that, right? He's not really putting too much pressure on himself. And the Devils did a good job. They had 3 players around him always.
Yeah.
They collapsed near him. And if they keep doing that, he'll survive because he's very good at just being a good, system kind of goalie where he's not going to be out of position. He has a very good glove hand. He's got some size. And, he's just good enough with the stick to get rid of the puck. Those kinds of things. I mean, the Devils have enough offense, and I do want the Devils to get more offense out of their blue line. I feel like Hamilton went a little dead and those things. But in the end, I'm taking Devils in 6 because I do think the Carolina Hurricanes play similarly in certain ways to the Rangers, and I think they could beat that again.
I think Hamilton probably wanted to be less risky because we know his history of he's sort of exposing himself in terms of allowing offensive chances the other way. I mean, he's had a great year, but he probably wanted to be a little more careful against the Rangers who could counterattack. I mean, I look at this series and there are questions in goal, like we both said. I mean, I think they'll stick with Schmid because he's played really well. Would we be surprised if we see Kochetkov in this series? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at anything when it comes to.
You talked about that. Nobody believes that Brind'Amour would do that. So it's going to be between the 2 goalies there, Anderson and Raanta.
Yes, I would think that unless an injury pops up. But I'm just saying. What I'm saying is nothing would surprise me. I do think that the big thing about this series is the absence of Svechnikov and Teravainen. There is some speculation out there that Teravainen might be able to come back at some point in the series, but he had a broken finger. So, them taping 2 fingers together, let's just say he's not going to be shooting the way he was before the injury. So I think New Jersey's offense is better. I don't think that their defense is a slouch, although I think Carolina's is better than theirs. It's going to be a really close series, and that's why I had Devils in 7.
Yeah, that's why I got Devils in 7 too. I'm with you. I do think that this is almost a pick'em series in a lot of ways. To me, the Carolina defense. You remember the Devils' offense besides Hughes was pretty bad. In that series against the Rangers, Hughes was everything. I mean, Brad had no goals. Myers had no points. It was Hughes. It was the Hughes show. And if Carolina and Brind'Amour might be able to, somehow figure out a way to stop Hughes a little bit better, maybe. If he does it the right way. If you can stop Hughes, I don't think the Devils can score beyond that. And I think that even though they don't have the forwards because of the injuries, they have such a good defense that they could give. They're better defensively than the Rangers were. I think. Do you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, I do agree with that.
So I think the Carolina could take it too. I'm going Devils in 7, but honestly, Devils in 7, Carolina in 5 in my head.
I don't think
it could go. It could go that Carolina just figures them out.
The only reason I did it in 6 because I don't think the Devils could win in Carolina in a game 7, and I think they should play the series so it doesn't get to that. And I think when they made the switch, it was the right switch for them because it's they've been 3 out of 4 since then. So I don't expect them to make the switch again, and I think the team's pretty energized. And listen, if you're going to get some production like out of Eric Halla, he got the game winner. Like, Marino made a hell of a play. Like all of a sudden he showed off a level of skating that I hadn't seen from him in a while. So, if guys are going to rise to the occasion, Carolina has fewer guys of that nature to rise to the occasion. That's where I think they're just like Kevin said, I do think it's a personnel thing now, even though Carolina will play a great system.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it depends. Aho, stepped up last series and did a lot. He's going to be required to do a lot again, for sure. And I think, I don't know. So does anybody feel? Okay, this is one question I just have for you guys before we get out of here really quickly. So you get in this spot where it's exciting to get these upsets. It's like you're like, wow, Seattle won and Florida won, and then you realize that Colorado and Boston are gone. I mean, just as a fan watching it from the outside, is there any do you would way out for me what you'd rather have? Would you rather have the Cinderella stories or the Stars playing still? Like the Rangers are gone. The Rangers are like an exciting star-driven team. The Devils have used, but beyond that, they're not like necessarily like.
Are you asking us or
asking you guys? Like personally, just try to put your fan hat on for a second. Like,
right.
Just watch this and from watching it. Assuming you have
I'd rather have the Kraken in.
You would?
For sure. Oh yeah. I mean that's the story. I mean, one of the greatest stories ever, the '69 Mets. You're always. The underdog is always a great story, and it's compelling. And even in the NCAA basketball tournament, when a smaller school makes a run or an unheralded team, everybody kind of gets behind it, and there's always a story. So I'm a typical fan where if we get lower seeds in and they make a run, especially if they can go more than one round, because I think that's upsets can happen no matter what. But I think if you got a lower rung team that suddenly wins 2 series in a row. Now you're into something here. Then you're a momentum team.
I think you have a good balance here, Ak, because you have 2 Cinderella stories, one in each conference. Florida beating Boston and Seattle beating Colorado. You have the President's Trophy winner losing. You have the reigning Stanley Cup champion losing. You have the team that made 3 finals in a row losing, but you have star players. You have Matthews, you have McDavid, you have Draisaitl. So I think there's a balance there. Honestly, does anybody think it got boring in the middle of the last decade when it was Chicago and LA and every year? I mean, it got boring. So
I actually like dynasty teams, because I like there being a dragon to slay.
Yeah, no,
I don't mind the Cinderella story. I don't. I'll tell you what I do mind. This guy Kirk Gunderson in the chat room questioning my credibility. I've been in this for like 23 years, dude. So pipe down.
Okay, well, Kurt, you just been.
We're gonna get rid of Kurt.
Hi.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, guys. The chat room is a fun place.
Yeah. No, but like, okay, it's not like I mean, I think the playoffs missed out on the fact that Sidney Crosby wasn't even in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But because that would have been a good, especially Pittsburgh going up against Boston, because a team that won cups in recent history against, but in the end, do you think that Pittsburgh would have beaten Boston? No, I don't think so. But Florida had the right formula to beat them. So I get the dynasty thing, but I mean,
Yeah.
I got tired of it. I got tired of the Islanders. I got tired of the Oilers.
Yeah.
It got old.
But when we were younger, there were these teams that would win 4 years in a row. Like in that,
I
Yeah.
got tired of the
I saw
Canadians.
the dynasties, but I did get tired of dynasties too. I do like the occasional Cinderella. Like it was thrilling covering Carolina winning. It was thrilling covering Tampa winning. Like those were, to me, those were thrilling. While I knew a lot of people that were like, "Oh, these are these markets that shouldn't be markets," and and I was in the thick of it. And being in the thick of it, I was like, I'm really happy for these fans and these teams, and it really did help the league too, by the way. And it helps the league if there is a Cinderella team that wins once in a while.
Yeah,
I'm selective in my dynasties.
Okay.
The Oilers were fun. I covered them, obviously. I did all 5 of their runs, spent a lot of my springs in Edmonton. But they were a very dynamic team. Even at the end, when Gretzky was gone, they were still very dynamic. So they were fun to cover. And by then they had it all down. Like they knew what to say, so there was always good storylines. And, they were just seasoned veterans. It was like talking to guys who had seen it all the time. So I really enjoyed that run, and I was disappointed when it was over. I thought Chicago with 3 felt like I wanted them to keep winning too. Same reason. Taves and Kane are fun, entertaining. Seabrook, Duncan Keith. They had a lot of memorable players. Right. Again, they had been through it. They were fun to talk to. You get Seabrook to sit and chat. He was fun to deal with.
Right.
The Kings didn't feel like I I needed to see them to keep going. I don't know why, but they just
they played a boring style. That's why.
They didn't entertain me. And then I missed it. For a while there, every other year we had a different team. Yeah. I was actually hoping against hope because my brain told me from watching Tampa Bay that they had lost it. And I think they knew they lost it too. But, if they could have gotten back to the final, like I would have loved that. Like I would have thought, like, this is just way too amazing. Right. So I think dynasties are fun if there's storylines that go with it. Yeah. Like the Montreal in the 1970s. Yeah. I didn't think that was very fun.
No.
They were so much better than everyone else.
They were so much better than
everyone else. They had talented players. I love watching Guy Lafleur, but like what was the storyline? Every year it was like, we're so much better than everyone else. We're going to win. So, so I didn't think that was it. I like the Islanders too. They were fun.
They're a good time. I mean, I think my thinking is like, and you're talking from a storage perspective because obviously it's hard to separate that out from a storage perspective.
Yeah, I am.
But there's definitely but I went. So I would the one Stanley Cup final I covered that really had very little juice to it at all was Ottawa Anaheim, and it was one of these ones that
true.
It really was just a hard series to get into. Like,
I know a lot of people got into it, and for a very different reason.
Well, people wanted Ottawa to lose, right?
There you go. Exactly.
So that was happening because
why did they want Ottawa to lose?
Ottawa was an inherently hateable team for most of the player, most of the fan bases in the East.
I never knew.
There's a lot of jealousy that went on between Toronto and Montreal because Toronto and Montreal not getting there, for a long time.
In Buffalo too, Ak.
Buffalo too, but the jealousy was pretty rampant among some pretty big markets, and that put
that team was despised by most of the teams.
There weren't players on that team that you would despise. It wasn't like that team had
Alfredson and Heatley and Emery, and there was a lot of
class player up and down.
Chara.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel like
I want to interrupt this conversation for a bulletin for Russ. The Mets are down 3-0.
I know. I saw the home run.
So to me, that was. So I remember being in Ottawa, taking the tour. They give the media people a tour if you want to. No one ever takes it, but I always try to take them of the city.
Exciting tour of downtown Canada.
Yeah, they put you on a bus and they take it and they teach you what a beaver tail is and they show you all the different things. And I went around Ottawa. And there were 3 people on the bus, three media members on the bus with me. But when I got to Anaheim, XM called me to cover the game for them because they didn't send anybody to the series. And if Anaheim won the cup, they wanted to get some voices from down on the ice. It was like that was really a tough one. So then I looked at this and I'm like, okay,
that was a tough commute, Ak. It was a tough Ottawa to Anaheim is a tough
I did have coverage in both areas for my website, but it was hard.
That's like Tampa, Edmonton, or Tampa, Calgary in 2004.
So,
That
but
was
what
tough.
if we get like New Carolina? I don't know. Carolina. Who would be the really rough one in this one? I guess it would be Carolina,
Edmonton.
I would say Carolina, Dallas. No, Carolina, Dallas would be the one that would have that wouldn't have as much. Seattle would have some fun to it because it's Seattle.
Dallas is an American Airlines hub, so the travel would not.
It's easy to get to.
I'm not talking about travel. I'm just talking about juice among fans. Carolina, Dallas. Is that an exciting Stanley Cup final for people? Would they be into that?
Dallas fans are really passionate. So
Yeah.
I think Carolina is too. I think from like if you're an American, right, and you're looking at it through that lens, then you probably don't want to see like Edmonton,
Toronto. You don't want to see Edmonton, Toronto.
Right, Edmonton, Toronto probably is right. They probably don't want to see that.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, Edmonton, Toronto, Connor McDavid, and I mean, Austin.
But I think some Americans might turn that off.
I think American hockey fans.
You can't judge it by that because we simply don't watch the final unless you're in it. I mean, the ratings bear that out. Other than the city of Buffalo, the ratings for cities outside the two Stanley Cup final cities never generate any viewership. It's not like the Super Bowl. So, that's just the fact.
Carolina would generate the least.
Well, that's true, but you're going to go from 50 fans to 20. That sort of thing. It's an exaggeration, but it's I mean, your point is well taken. Carolina would not, have a national, draw to it. But I've got a question. It just made me think about it because I know there's, there are people that are, I kid Mike about it, but I know there are people who find sports gives them a chance to, dislike someone or root against someone. But what do you think the percentage is, the number of people that watch sports to root against a team as opposed to root for a team?
Lots.
Because Mike's the only person that I know, and I'm being very clear.
I
don't really have any friends who spend as much time liking other teams.
In my neighborhood, Kev, we would call it hate watching. Yeah. And actually, I read an article the other day. Hate watching's on the rise because of gambling too.
Yes.
Yeah, I see that. I can see that. Yeah.
Watchers.
Yeah, I mean, and when I was a kid, it was a joke that everybody hated the Yankees, because they were always on television, and your team was never on TV. The Yankees were on every Saturday, but it was just kind of a running joke. People didn't really hate them. You just talked about hating them because
right.
No, I can tell you in the New York area, there's real hate. Like if you're a Met fan, most of them hate the Yankees.
Right. Just pure jealousy. That's all. A couple news and notes before we end. The nominees, the three finalists for two of the awards came out last night. Jack Hughes, Anze Kopitar, and Braden Point for the Lady Byng. I don't think any of those are really surprises. And equally the same for the Selke. Bergeron, Nico Hischier, and Mitch Marner, the finalists for the Selke. I think Bergeron's probably going to win because it's the last chance for him to win it. So that'll be the sentimental thing. And I think they had such a fantastic year that people will have voted for him. But I just he's a Hall of Fame player. So and I mean, Kev, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I will say this, and I hope I'm not wrong on this, but I thought it was harder this year for the Selke than normal.
It was
because there were too many forwards now that have, gained a reputation for being two-way guys. I mean, coaches demand that now.
Yeah.
And so I thought there were a lot of guys.
I had Hischier second. I had Jordan Stahl third. I did have Bergeron winning, but I think Hischier could have won just as easy.
Yeah, I had those three in the top three, and Marner is unusual because he's a winger, and most of the time it goes
like my fourth, I think.
Yeah, but I thought there was probably 7 to 10 guys I could have put in my top 5 in any order.
But I'll be honest, if they changed and they put in a new award for the Lady Byng, I'd be happy. I don't like Lady Byng.
No, I don't mind Lady Byng. I just want people to stop. Too many people I know go and they look at the penalty minutes and they add it up. I hate that. Like, it has nothing to do with penalty minutes. It doesn't matter if you got 4 or 8 or 10 or 12. It's genuinely play. Right. So you ought to be able to say off the top of your head without looking at the penalty minutes who those people are. And I've said this for a long time. They should put that in parentheses. Has nothing to do with penalty minutes. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Gentlemanly play. Like Nick Lidstrom should have won that award 10 years in a row.
Right.
Is there anyone more gentlemanly in the NHL than in the way he played and conducted himself than Nick Lidstrom?
Hard to
But
find.
Kev, I'll bet you anything 95% of the voters for the Lady Byng, if you took the accumulated amount of penalty minutes of the top 5, it'd be less than 50.
Well, yeah, I mean that's how people do it. I would say 95% of the writers look it up. That's what they do. They just get the penalty minutes out, and it's like, come on, you guys are better. You will report better
really
than
know
that.
about gentlemanly play. How can we really know about gentlemanly play on the ice? Like, we can know, like, if
you can just tell by the guys the way they conduct themselves.
Yeah.
The guys that just play the game. They're not involved at the end of the after the whistle. They're they just get their job done every way all the time. Their coaches talk about what great
Classy
team
players
classy players they are. You hear people talk about it.
Right.
I mean, we could all come up with a list of 5 or 10 people. Like Patrice Bergeron would be a candidate every year.
Sure.
Yeah, we know how he plays. I don't care how many penalty minutes he has. I could care less. He is a classy player. We know he's a classy player.
If a player like that gets 1 10-minute misconduct, Kev, they're out of the running for the
not for me, for you.
No, but
No.
Sidney Crosby. I was at a game where Sidney Crosby did get not a 5 for fighting, but he got like a double minor. And he goes, "I guess I'm not winning Lady Byng now." He didn't say that.
No, even
when you have a player that says it,
Well, it's the same thing with Masterton too. I have this, I'm irritated about that because I remember Letang said, and I use this to try to make my point. It is not comeback player of the year. You don't have to become sick or get injured to win the Masters. And as Letang said the year he won it, it's the one award you don't want to win because that means you got hurt or you got sick.
But Kev, you know what they should do then? They should have a comeback player.
We have talked about it for years.
Yes.
Talked about it for years. Yeah. It just never has gotten done.
Yeah.
One last thing.
3-2 now, Kev. 3-2.
3-2. Yeah.
One last thing, Russ. After the loss, the Rangers lost to the Devils. All you heard on New York radio was Gallant's toast, and now. The chatter I heard on one of the morning shows was that now that he got cleared by the NHL and you have the connection to Panarin and you have the connection to Patrick Kane, that Joel Quenneville is potentially a leading candidate for the Rangers job.
Yeah, I just think it's a bad move, not because he can't coach, but because if you're bringing him in to revive Panarin. There's nothing wrong with Panarin's regular season. It's during the playoffs, and he admitted it's a bad playoff. If you think bringing him in is going to revive Kane and Panarin, and that's going to win you a Stanley Cup, you're on the wrong path. That's all I'm going to say.
Someone better call Gary Bettman. He'll have something to say about that. Like, I don't know. I have no idea what he will rule, but
it came out yesterday or a couple days ago that there was some review by the NHL and that he'd been cleared. Now I don't know.
I didn't see that.
No, but I thought I saw that he still has to talk to Bettman.
Okay.
I thought I saw that.
Okay.
I don't think that's taken place yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'd be careful.
Yeah.
Because I think Gary Bettman can come down pretty strong in those cases.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
All right, well, that's about all the time we have for today, guys. It's going to be a fun one tonight. Definitely watching. Watch your games and enjoy. We'll be back again tomorrow to talk about them and see what happened with these because who knows what's going to happen once Campbell gets in there. Mike, remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you soon.
It's called the loss.